Welcome back. Today we're going to link our user profile information up with our API. More specifically, we'll add the ability to post a new profile image, delete the user's profile image, update their information, and a button to sign out of all devices they may be logged in with. Right now in our application, if we log in with our trusty bob@bob.com, with the password, you'll see we get this little login form and an image selector that we created last time, but we're not actually displaying the user's current profile image. So let's make that happen. We could do that either inside of the user form or the details kind of more top level route component. And let's do that in the details view in this case. So first, I actually want to take some text from this user form that says update user, and I actually want this to go into the user details page, or I guess it's just called details. So let's add this as H1. I did want to add a little margin on this too, some vertical margin, actually quite a bit of it, and let's call this user account. Beneath this header here, or I guess H1 tag, not a header, let's go ahead and add an image for the user if one exists. Remember that in this component, we're fetching the user from this API account me endpoint, and then we're kind of returning it on this me data. Basically what we're doing here is we're saying if there's not any me data or user with an image URL, we want to display a little gray circle that is the same size of the image. So this will have a width of 32, which is 128 pixels, and a height of the same. And then if we do have an image on the me data, we want to show that with an alt tag of user profile image. Right now, this user does not have an image, bob@bob.com. If we go to our database, and I probably need to refresh this, but let's go to our users table. And we can see that bob@bob.com has no image. Now to fix this, I just want to use Postman to update an image for them. It won't be cropped like we need it to be, but we'll do that later. So I'm now in Postman where we have I guess I'm at the delete image endpoint. We don't want to do that yet. Let's go to sign in our bob@bob.com user. And I have this base URL, which is our malcorp.test/API/account sign in. So let's sign the user in. I have some scripts that will automatically set the auth header for me in the other endpoints. So we can actually just go to the post image URL here, and let's make sure we take a body, and I already have an image. I don't know what this is saying, whatever. I have a Denver profile image that I'd previously created, and let's upload this. Let's try one more time. I don't know why it didn't work the first time. Maybe because I updated Postman, but here is our image URL. And if we go back to our database now and update this, you can see that I have an image. So let's go back to our view application and let's just hit refresh. And now you see an image is displayed here. I also want to make some UI changes to this select and clear image section. I don't want to say clear. I want to say cancel, meaning canceling the cropping operation. I also want this to say upload new image, or maybe just upload image, just to give the user a better idea of what these buttons do, because we're going to be adding more buttons and I don't want this to be confusing. I also want to remove this update user header right here. And I had the update user here merely because I had forgotten to save a file inside of the view project. So if you just save everything, it should only say user account up at the top. All right, let's get back to adding those UI changes for the buttons, and we'll do that inside of image cropper. Here we have a button that says if there's not an image source, let's actually have it say a new image to indicate that they want to put a new image. And then this button here that says crop image with the handle image crop handler. Let's make this say update, and this will only be rendered when the image cropper is shown. So this will let the user know that they're kind of sending the new image to the database, not just cropping it. And then this one, I want to say cancel to sort of cancel the operation. Then also we have the span that shows the selected file name here. And I actually want the v-if, instead of being just on the file name, I want it to be on the outer div here. I don't want to show any selected file. I don't want to show this that says selected file : if there's no selected file. So I want to move the v-if to this outer div. Let's go see those changes. And you can see now it says new image or cancel. And one more change to that cancel button. I only want to show the cancel button if there is some image source here. So we'll add another v-if to the cancel one here, this button. And we'll only show it if they're opening an image to crop. That's what this image source means. There, now it's kind of clear. Okay, I want to create a new image. And if you open this image, then you see it will say beneath, to update or cancel. And if we click cancel, it's gone and we're back. One more thing I want to do is if we do decide to update the image and submit it to our server, or in this case, we're firing or emitting an event from our image cropper, I also want to set the selected file inside of the image cropper to null. So let's go back. And in this image cropper, I should have thought these things out better beforehand. Sorry for the confusion, but in this handle image cropped, you see that we basically take the cropped image and create a file or a blob from it. And then we emit that blob on the image cropped event. And then after all of this, let's just say selected file, which is a ref property in here, and we'll set the value to null. And so basically that will clear the image and close our image preview, or our cropper preview, I should say. In order to post the image, now we need to take advantage of the useRequest utility function that we created in the last tutorial, which is right here, which basically takes some request options and reactively tracks if we're loading or fetching the data and if we get an error or successful data. So we're going to actually add a lot of these, so brace yourself. The first one that I want to add is one for posting the image. And you can see actually we already have the one for getting the me data here. So right beneath it, let's get the image data, and sort of a loading. And of course I have to rename all these so that they don't conflict with the me loading and the other data we're actually going to fetch later. So from the template, we're going to need to also return the post image, and then a post image data, and then also a post image error for possible display. And we'll handle this post image loading shortly. But take note of this request. Note that it uses the authorization value, the ID token, which is kind of extracted from our useAuth here. And so we make that authorized request, and we'll also have to supply an image when we call this post image. We have yet to call it. The next thing I want to do is actually just kind of make a unified loading state where we'll show a loader on top of this entire component. I want to show this loader if any of our loading states are true. And we can do that by means of a computed property. So I'll do that in our script. First, we need to import computed from view. And then down here in the template, perhaps before we return, we'll add a const loading, which is a computed ref. And then that will return whether we have a me loading or a post image loading. And we'll add our other loading states later. But most importantly, let's replace this me loading with just loading. And this is going to produce some problems inside of our template. So let's go up to our user form now and change these two me loadings to loading. So if we're making any update, we'll show this loader. Because I'm doing this, I want to make a few small changes to our template. So let's actually take this loader, and just for visual purposes to make this easier to understand, I'm going to put it just below the H1. So here's our loader, will show if loading. And then underneath that, I want to put a velse on this margin bottom 4 sort of class here, where we can show anything else that we want to show. And in fact, I believe that I want to move this user form and this paragraph into the upper div with a margin of bottom of 4 here. So let's just move that up and save. So everything still appears to be in place. We'll see if I've made any error shortly. One thing that we can omit, is this and is not loading, because we know we're not loading because we're in the velse statement now. So we can get rid of this loading. There we go. Otherwise, I hope I haven't missed anything. We'll see. Now, when are we going to call our post image that we have on this use request, this exec method post image? We're going to do that when our user form emits the image submitted event. So what we're going to do is create a handle image submitted method inside of our setup, and that will be called when we get the @image submitted event here on the user form. So we have to, of course, create that method, and we'll do that down inside of the setup, maybe between the use request here, this use request for the image, and the computed property. So when our image is submitted, we will receive that image blob. Remember, our image cropper submits that in the event. And then we need to create form data because our API endpoint for an image is expecting multi-part form data. So we're going to create that via JavaScript, via new form data, and we'll append on the image file key the actual blob. And then we'll call post image, which will reach out to the API with Axios, and we'll pass in the form data as the actual data. And we need to return this from our template so that it is from our script. I keep saying that backwards. We need to return that so it is accessible in our template. So let's save. And we'll handle these errors for the me error or post image error later on. If we go back here, we should be able to see a submission, and let's refresh just to make sure we have a good token. To refresh our ID token, let's go to the network tab here, and let's make sure that if we update our image that we see a post with a success status here. Let's use this one. I want to use my cropper actually. Oh yeah, it zooms. There we go. And let's update. You saw a little loader, but wait, here we go. We didn't actually see the new image here, but we see that the post image here in our networking tab. I didn't need to double click that. That's the problem with being zoomed in, but you can't see in my whole browser. But anyway, we posted the image and we got an image back with a message of success and a status of 200. So why don't we see the new image here? Well, it turns out that the way our API works, the user will always use the same URL even if they update their image. It's just stored in the same URL inside of cloud storage and the database. However, there's an old trick we can use, which is to assign a query parameter with the current date, which will basically make the browser think that it needs to look for a new image when it sees an image with, a new trailing date at the end. So it thinks it's a different URL, but at the end, we don't have any query parameters at our URL, so we'll actually fetch the latest image. So what we're going to end up doing is actually creating a ref for our image source inside of our template. So let's go back up to the top of our setup and let's create a ref for our image source. And then we need to import ref from view. And what I want to do then is watch for any changes to our various data sources that could update the image. So if we get new me data, that could come in with an image URL. And if we post an image and get valid post image data, that could also come in. So I'm going to do this via a watch. So let's actually go back up to the imports from view and also import watch. So I want to watch each of these sources separately. And then if we get new data, I want to update the image source. So let me show you how this is done. Let me scroll down, maybe just above the computed property. We create this watcher so I can watch me data because it's a ref. And then we get two parameters in this watcher. We get the old data or the new data and the old or previous data. And what I want to do is see if we have new data on the me data. And so if not new data, I just want to not do anything in this function here. So we're actually not going to even use the old data. And then I want to make sure that we have an image URL on the user data. But if we don't have any image URL, it's going to be represented as an empty string in our API. So in that case, I want to set our image source, that ref that we just set, to null. And if we do have an image source or an image URL on the user data, then I want to add a query parameter with an underscore and then just the current date as a timestamp, that trick I just mentioned. So let's do something similar if we get fresh post image data just below. And so if we get post image data, we shouldn't have any case where we don't have an image URL because we've just posted an image successfully. So we don't need to really do this first check, but we do need to set the image source value in the same manner. Then, of course, we need to return the image source. And then in our template, we need to use this image source instead of whatever the me data that we were using before. Here is our image tag. So now instead of using me data.user.image URL, let's just use image source. And let's hope that things are still working. Remember, that was that image I just made last time, but remember it didn't fetch. Let's see if we can actually update this image. Let's just go this one. And we'll crop. He's already zoomed in pretty good. And you see it updated because we did that new data trick or that new date trick. I now want to work on deleting an image. To do that, I want to create a red button. And we added some very basic styles to kind of extend the Tailwind styles inside of index.css. So let's add a red button now. So beneath all our hovers, let's add one that's a button red outside of button gray, and it'll just have a background red of 600 with white text. And then I want to make a hover effect on this button that will basically make it a lighter red of background 400. Everything else will stay the same. Let's now go down in our details view still, and let's add another user request between the handle image submitted and this user request to post an image. And this one will be for deleting an image. So basically, we call the exec function to post to our API. We call it delete image. We create a delete image data error and loading, and we're reaching out to the URL API account image with a delete method and our authorization headers. Now we're adding a new loading state here, so let's make sure to add that to our computed property. So let's scroll down. Where's that? Towards the bottom. So we want our overall loading state to also show loading if we have delete image loading .value. Furthermore, we need to create a similar watcher if we delete an image. So if we get new data returned from delete image data from this, again, use request delete image data, then we want to clear the image data in our UI. There's probably a more logical and straightforward way to do this, but I found this the most straightforward for me, and I was just kind of in a hurry to get done with this. So if we delete data, if there's not new data, we return, but if there is, and it has a message of success, which is our API's message, then we want to set our image source value to null. We now need to return the delete image and delete image error from our setup. And we'll do that down here. All right, so we're now deleting the image and supplying the error to our template. And we need to create a delete button in our template that can fire this delete image method. Let us scroll up. This is getting kind of long, especially since I'm using big font to make this kind of visible for y'all. And let's add this between the image and the user form. So here's a button of type button. The click, very importantly, we'll call that delete image method from our use request. And I just add some styles for margin for a width of 32, and I apply those button and button red classes from index.css. Let's save and see if this exists now. All right, we have a delete button. I could make it delete image, that would make it clear, but then I have to make all of our buttons wider to make them match, and I was lazy and did not want to do that. Let's delete. And okay, something is not updating here. Let's make sure the image was actually deleted. If I go to pgadmin, it looks like there is no image URL. And let's try refreshing the app to see if it works on a refresh. Okay, there's no image. Let's see if it was something with the state of our application. So I've done a hard refresh. Let's try to assign an image. Let's upload. So interestingly, it looks like our template has the proper image. And the reason that I think we're having some issues here is that in this div where I'm showing the image, if we have an image source, I'm still only looking at the me data for the rounded gray URL. So this is actually resulting in true even though we've made updates. So this vif needs to become if not image source. So something I forgot there. Let's now go back. Aha, our image is already showing. We can delete, and let's try updating a new one. Let's crop it. All right, it seems to be working now. It's now time to do something similar for our update user details, meaning to update those text fields for the email address, name, and website URL. To make this possible, we'll need to create a method to handle the details submitted event on our user form component. We're also going to compute our current user inside of our template. So we're going to set the vif of our user form. Instead of me data, we're going to set this to a user, which we'll shortly create. Then we need to also, as I just mentioned, handle the details submitted, which our form fires when we click the update button in the form. All right, let's go create this stuff. First, we'll need to create the use request that reaches out to our account details. Let's maybe add that beneath delete image. So it will access update details and data similar, but this is a put request to our account details. Let's then add a handle submitted handler that we need to define, and we'll need to return this as well. And this handle details will basically forward the details from the event onto our update details method. It's already in the proper JSON structure to submit to our API. We'll need to update our loading state at the very bottom to also handle this update details loading possibility. And make sure to include .value. Then to determine the current user, we're going to create a computed property. And we'll do that beneath the loaded one, and I'll explain this in a minute. So this will be the user that I mentioned. And basically what it's going to do is see if we have any update details data. And if we do, we're going to use that user for our templates user. Otherwise, use the initial user on page load, which is on me data. So let's go ahead and then return both the user and that handle details submitted event, or method, I should say. We'll also need the update details error and the user. All right, so let's see if we can update a user. And I'll also go to the database to see this. Let's maybe hard refresh. We've got our image, we've got some info, and these should match up inside of our database, which they do. Let's now maybe add a name, Bobbykins. And then we'll say http bobbykins.me maybe. And now we have a valid URL, so we can click update. And that was super fast. Maybe I should set a slower data speed here. But we're working locally, so I'd have to emulate it in the network tab. But anyway, the details are updated here. Let's check our database. And there we go. Everything seems to be updated properly. We're now going to add the ability to sign out of all devices. But remember that signing out is related to our auth state. So we're actually going to do something a little differently. We're not going to add a use request inside of details, but instead we're going to go to store, auth.js, and add a sign-up method to our store. So if we scroll here, you can see we have some sign-up and sign-in methods that kind of call another method, but that's okay. We'll add a sign-out here, which is an async function. Let's save to get some formatting. And it basically sets our auth state loading to true, and then it clears out any possible errors. We then make a request to our sign-up endpoint or sign out and extract any possible error. If there is an error, we'll set it on our auth state and then clear the loading or set it to false. And then we're going to get rid of our current user and their ID token, and we're going to remove items from local storage. And in fact, I think I now have a method to do both of these. And when all is said and done, we'll set state is loading to false. So it turns out that I do not have these stored inside of our util. But I do want to make sure that we're using the proper ID token key and refresh token key. And so let's actually go ahead and maybe add. So these keys are wrong. This was from my demo app. Let's maybe cut these and add a method to our utility just so that we're all using these same constants. So let's say export const, remove tokens, and it doesn't need to take any parameters, but it's going to remove our ID token key that we've stored sort of as a constant and our refresh token key. We'll save that, go back to auth, and we'll need to import this in the util. So this will be remove tokens. And then inside of this sign out, we'll just call remove tokens here. Now all the tokens logic is in the util file. And of course, we'll set loading to false. And we need to return this from our store. And so we set up the store. Where do we do that? In create auth store when we initialize the store. So we'll return sign out. Now that sign out is available on our auth store, we can extract it from within use auth, which is being extracted inside of our details setup. So if I go way up to the top, this is getting kind of long. We can bring in sign out. And then if we return this from our script and make it accessible to the template, we can create a button to sign out. Let's add this button to sign out beneath the user form in our template. So let's go up. Here's our user form. We'll add a button with a little bit of vertical margin that will say sign out, and on click, we will call that sign out. Now our sign out, remember, it already has some watchers to see if our auth state changes, and if it does, it should push us to the authenticate page automatically. So let's go down here. Let's try signing out. And you can see we had a loading indicator and we're back here. Let's now add some possible errors to our template. I'm going to keep this very simple and we'll add these immediately beneath the button that we just created. So I'll actually get rid of this one. Actually, we're going to use this one still. Basically, I'm just going to have a series of v-ifs. There's a more sophisticated way to do this, I'm sure. But if we get any one of our errors, I want to display a message. So maybe we'll use our network tools to break our internet connection. That should return a request error, which our do request should handle. Let's see what errors I'm getting now. That I'm not authorized. Of course not. Let's maybe try creating a new user. Bob03. Let's sign him up. Great. Let's try a new image. This one looks good. Bob3. Just kind of seeing if the whole general flow works. I'm sure there's some edge cases we're missing. I got to do : / Let's update. Very good. Let's try signing out. Let's try signing him in again. That was Bob03. And the last thing I want to do is maybe let's try deleting, but let's get rid of our internet connection so they won't be able to delete their image. Let's say offline. I went to the network tab offline here, and let's click delete. All right, and so maybe I should display this error up here, but if we scroll down, we get a failed to delete image method. Well, my friends, that is it for our view client. To conclude this client section, I have some bittersweet news. And the bad news is that this series is going to end without actually doing the memrizr, TypeScript React app, and Node backend. And the reason it's good news is that I'm starting my first professional programming job. So if I do continue to add content, I want to make more short, narrow topics. To watch these tutorials is a huge investment. And quite frankly, I don't know if I would have the time to watch them myself. But thanks so much for watching and for your support. Que lo pasen re lindo. Until next time, ciao.